and welcome to a brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight we will be focusing on the recent developments in the Egyptian economy, and more specifically the Egyptian or the Suez Canal economic zone, the recent developments that took place there under the directives of the political leadership and His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, as well as developing the commercial fleet of Egypt in the upcoming months of years. And I'm honored to be having with me in the studio tonight to be shedding more light on those recent developments is Dr. Sherin and Naggar, the member of the International Navigation Chamber. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Anytime. First of all, we'll be starting straight away with the top story for today, and it comes all the way from Tunisia, but in the same field and the same sector, which is the African economy. As the Tokyo International Conference on Development in Africa wrapped up in the Tunisian capital. Addressing the closing session, Tunisian President Kais Saied said that the African citizens must be able to attain rights to the healthcare and education. He said security cannot be achieved without development, adding that the human development and the right to education must be provided to all the nations. Japan's Prime Minister also addressed the closing session of the TCAD 8 through the video conference, stressing the importance of the development in Africa. We will be heading to the first report of the Daily Debate for tonight, and it comes from the economic reforms that were undertaken in the past 8 years under the tenure of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and the positive developments that took place in the same time.
The government continues to make progress on economic reforms, and while many challenges remain, Egypt's investments climate is improving, thanks in part to the macroeconomic reforms it completed as part of a 3-year, $12 billion International Monetary Fund program from 2016 to 2019. Egypt is considered one of the fastest growing emerging markets prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. Egypt is also the only economy in the Middle East and North Africa to record positive economic growth in 2020, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, and thanks in part to IMF assistance totaling $8 billion. Increased investor confidence and high real interest rates have attracted foreign portfolio investment and increased foreign reserves. In 2021, the government announced plans to launch a second round of economic reforms aimed at increasing the role of the private sector in the economy, addressing long-standing customs and trade policy challenges, modernizing its industrial base, and increasing exports. The government of Egypt increasingly understands that attracting foreign direct investments, FDI, is key to addressing many of its economic challenges, and has stated its intention to create a more conducive environment for the FDI. Egypt has passed several regulatory reform laws which aim to improve its investment and business climate and help the economy realize its full potential. The country will host the United Nations Climate Change Conference COP27 in November 2022 and the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, which will be a good opportunity for expanding channels of investment and attracting foreign capitals into the country's local market. Recognizing the immense challenges the country faces from the impacts of climate change, the government officials announced that the cabinet will approve 30% of government investments in the 2022-2023 budget to green investments, up from 15% in the current fiscal year 2021-2022, and that by 2030, all new public sector investment spending would be green.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and as I said in the beginning, that tonight we'll be focusing and concentrating on the latest developments regarding the Egyptian economic development in the Suez Canal Economic Development Zone and the Egyptian commercial fleet. The latest developments regarding that with engineer Sherin and Naggar, the International Maritime Transport Consultant. Thank you very much once again for being with us.
Thank you very much.
First of all, the Suez Canal Economic Zone, we had high hopes for. How do you see the future of it now?
Well, maybe I should go a little bit backwards in that respect. We have suffered as a nation for a number of years, actually a number of decades, from neglect into Sinai and well, the Suez Canal was just about the only authority that is actually the only organization that was functioning in Egypt at one stage, and it actually saved Egypt during the 2011 crisis because it was the only source of foreign currency. But when the new administration under President Sisi took over, the vision was to rebuild the country overall. And to rebuild the country overall, you need to build new communities like the new El Alamein, the new capital, Mansoura, Asyut, everywhere. And that building and that construction had to be coupled by a means of creating more cash, and only creating cash by exporting and the exploitation of various mining sites like in the Golden Triangle, like somewhere in Abu Tartur, for example, in the middle of the Sahara. Also agriculture, where we have now jumped to a very high level of exports, which we have never seen in our history as a nation. All this demanded a very efficient network, transport network, because transport is life. And without proper and adequate transport, you will not be able to move, nor will anybody take any interest in your country as Egypt to develop anything. How am I going to move my goods? How am I going to bring in my raw materials? So that is why transport is a key and a major element in any development. Now, just to be on the side, all the slum areas and the various haphazard housing constructions being built over the past decades have been built as a consequence of inadequate transport, where people cannot go from work to where they live on a daily basis in a humanly manner and in a civilized means of transport. So the result was that they opted for living close to their work, even if they were living in a slum. And that is what created all that. Now, this government, or this administration generally, is addressing all that at the same time. We have built various industrial sites, like there are plenty of sites in Sokhna, for example. We have seen sites, industries that we have not seen in Egypt before, like, for example, phosphoric acid. We normally used to export phosphate on a very low scale. And cement we were importing cement at one stage. Now we are a major exporter of cement. And again, this warrants proper port facilities and proper and adequate transport facilities from manufacturing to the port, and proper port handling equipment, proper size handling ships that can be of a big size for economical size and so on. So if you come now to the Suez Canal Economic Zone, it is one of various key areas that have been focused on by the presidential administration in particular, because it is in the vicinity of the Suez Canal. Now, Egypt is the center of the world, basically. We are in a very delicate geographical location. And everybody knows that, and our competitors know that. So unfortunately, we were not fully aware of that other than verbally in the past, where we were just saying, oh, we have a very good geographical location. Oh, what are we doing about it? Because there's a lot of competition. Now we are starting, and we have started for a long time, the Suez Canal Economic Zone is one of two major projects, two mega projects in Egypt. The other mega project is the Golden Triangle, but let us keep the Golden Triangle aside for the time being and let us discuss the Suez Canal Economic Zone. And the Suez Canal Economic Zone is a very highly diversified industrial zone where you have from pharmaceuticals to phosphates to acids to heavy industries like iron and steel. It is all spread all over between Sokhna and Ismailia and East Port Side. Now, to do that correctly and to do that efficiently, you must have the backup of Egyptian ports and proper ports. And I mean by proper ports, I mean ports that are run economically and run efficiently and have adequate equipment to handle the flow of the cargo in and out at a very limited time. And logistically, they have started, actually, it is building up and it's becoming more and more of a recognized area. Of course, we are only starting. I mean, this is just the beginning of a long and a very lucrative process if we can maintain our status and even improve on our acts and our regulations and break up whatever red tape there is left to break and make sure that we have an adequate place where we can say, okay, gentlemen, come, this is Egypt. Come and you get your best. But on the other hand, of course, we as a nation, we have a lot of security issues that need to be very carefully looked at in order not to jeopardize our national security. And that's a very delicate thing because you could see a lot of hostile parties could always hide behind industry or behind investment and actually come with the intention of investing, but the real intention is rather mean. So
yes.
That is something, of course, that is being very carefully addressed by the Egyptian security body.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that transport is key to life, not just for the people or the citizens, for life in general, for the investors to be coming more. How do you see the infrastructure progress that we've had in the past 8 years under the leadership of His Excellency President Al-Sisi? The focus on building new roads and more specifically your field of specialty or specialization is the maritime transport.
Well, if you look at ports, today we have ports on the Mediterranean, we have ports on the Red Sea, and these ports are handling certain commodities, and sometimes the ships passing through the Red Sea, through, say, for example, the port of Sokhna, do not necessarily have to come to Alexandria to drop their cargo. So they drop the cargo in Sokhna, and then this cargo needs to be moved over to Alexandria, Abu Qir, Cairo, whatever.
Yes.
Without a very highly sophisticated and an adequate road network, you will fail dramatically. And I think this particular point was realized by the president immediately upon assuming his position.
Yes.
And that is why you see a lot of roads being. A lot of people say, oh, why are we spending so much money on roads and there's so much, these roads are too big. And yes, they're too big today, but we are growing at a pace of 2 million people a year. And there's going to be a lot of growth in the future. So if you start building a road for 100 million, by the time you finish it in 1 year, you already built it for 102 million are going to be using it. Okay, fine. I mean, not everybody's going to be using the road. But what I'm trying to say is that your progress, your population growth is so fast that you need to build something for the future. No, you don't. I mean, we need to look further than the tip of our nose, as people say. And that is what has been happening. So that is one. The second thing, of course, is the rail network. I can see our rail has been built as a second railway system in the world, in history. A lot of people who came after us, they overtook us, and we ended up at one stage, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, with a pathetic railway network. And I'm ashamed to say that. But this is the reality. I mean, every morning you'd wake up oh, where there's a train rammed into another train, or a train slammed into a pier, or two trains hit into each other, whatever. So something had to be done about the rail.
Yes.
Rail is a very cheap, or the cheapest surface transport means after shipping. And to build up the rail network between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean is of absolute importance, because there you can move smaller commodities. You can move time-sensitive cargoes like perishable commodities, like meat, like frozen goods, and so on. This is very important. So moving cargoes like this by rail is much faster than even by ship. It is also quite economical, and it is a backbone for the transport network, which is actually the backbone of any development or any prosperity in any country.
Mm-hmm. The Suez Canal Economic Zone would be affecting positively the futures of millions of people living, for example, in Ismailia, in Port Said, and maybe even further for Sinai. How do you think it would be turning their lives into a better condition?
Well, at least it will offer them jobs. Because you are talking here about industrial zones, and industrial zones that are, be it in Suez or in Sokhna,
yes,
where you have a big industrial community, and it is growing. Now, this will require labor, it will require engineers, it will require all types of labor. It will require people to live there. So you'll be the idea of building up this economic zone is not just to build up some factories and get in investors and so on, but it's also to diffuse the huge congestion in the Nile Valley, be it in the Delta, or be it in Cairo, or be it in Giza, or even be it in Alexandria. We are living on 4% of 1 million square kilometers, which is it's unbearable, especially with the population growth. So this Suez Canal Economic Zone and the Golden Triangle, these two mega projects are not just for building factories and, okay, fine, these factories are going to require people. You need to make people moving people from one place to the other. They need housing. So there's going to be development, there's going to be prosperity. But in order to build up prosperity, you need to give them jobs. You need to make money. And when you make money, and if you have the cash to go and buy a flat, fine, go. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you'll be stagnant. And even if this was not done properly as it has been done, the economic zone would have been a complete failure. It has to be a full package.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned also the red tape. We need to be getting rid of as much of the red tape as possible in the near future, to be having more investments coming into Egypt, and more specifically into the Suez Canal Economic Zone. How far are we successful in this process?
We still need to go a bit longer. We still have some time, some way to go. There is a lot of old regulations, old red tape, and there is that we have inherited. But you cannot change all the laws of a country that have been suffering from this kind of red tape and this kind of bureaucracy and this kind of, I would say, retardation for 70 years or 60 years. You can't just go and change it overnight. So I sympathize with the government, I sympathize with the president, with the kind of burden and the load they have only on that particular legal issue, let alone other issues the government has to handle.
How can it change? You mentioned we have security challenges all over the world, and more specifically within Egypt and Sinai. How can it change to be attracting more investments into the Suez Canal Economic Zone, and at the same time keeping the security intact there?
Well, if you look at security risks we have been facing facing security risks from not just from the East, which is a traditional war, big conflict between Egypt and Israel and what have you. Even after Camp David, we still are suffering from a lot of security issues in Sinai. That has been almost eliminated. Why? Because Sinai was an isolated peninsula on its own and split by the Suez Canal. So if in order to get to Sinai, you have to cross the Suez Canal. And to cross the Suez Canal, you need to disturb the traffic in the Suez Canal. So you had to have small barges, or you had to have ferries running between one bank and the other. It was not very efficient. But now, with 6 new tunnels under the Suez Canal, this problem has been eliminated. And let alone what the army has been doing and the police have been doing to try and eliminate those criminals who have come. I don't know why they want to come to Egypt, why they want to be devastating a country that is trying to build itself and is not taking hostility against anybody. On the contrary, we are helping people who are in distress, or countries who are in distress. But again, this is always a problem. And then suddenly the Libyan threat, because Libya, with all the problems of the civil war that's going on in Libya at the moment, is not helping matters either. And also the Sudan, with all the turbulence and the turmoil in Sudan. So on the security front, the country, or Egypt, or the administration, or even the army, are facing a colossal security issue.
Yes.
And they are handling it, I dare say, very well. And we don't feel that we don't. I mean, you walk in the street today, you're not scared that while you're passing by a car, that car is going to blow up and blow you sky high. That's gone, finished. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yes.
And you don't hear much about terrorists in Sinai. Quite to the contrary. You see the president going to Sinai, opening up a new project here, or a new project there. That is where the Suez Canal Economic Zone is starting to get its security, and that is a major factor that will help it grow much faster. But I do sympathize with a bit of red tape, because, as I said, there's also the espionage type of things. People are coming behind, people who are trying to show that they are very friendly, or they are very hostile inside them, and you never really know the real intentions and so on. This kind of thing, of course, national security is number one. Otherwise, if those people take a grip of something, we will be back to square one, and that's something we don't want.
We will be hosting the COP27 for Climate Change Conference in November in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is something for the preservation of the climate, to be steering away from the negative impacts of climate change, to be going towards greener cities, greener energy, greener projects. How can we be having the Suez Canal Economic Zone and the development of it at the same time to be preserving the environment and steering away from the negative impacts of climate change, to be having a greener transport sector?
Simply, it is already happening, because anything being built, or any new project has got its climate restrictions as well. There are certain parameters that every industrialist or every manufacturer has to observe and follow carefully in order to be able to obtain the license. And these are all parameters that are helping in reducing the emissions and in improving our climate in general. But it's not just that we need to address, we need also to address the transport climate, the local cars and trucks and, in normal traffic, which is, of course, that is an issue which we definitely need to address very quickly, and that I'm afraid to say, or at least as a person, I observe it still needs a lot of attention.
Speaking of transport and the economy at the same time, the Egyptian commercial fleet, how are the developments going on for it now?
This is a very sad topic. I'm afraid it's a very sad topic. The Egyptian commercial fleet has been deteriorating, has been diminishing over the past 15, 20 years, from 60, 70 ships to maybe 12, 13 ships now. 12, 13 ships. The small size shipping company anywhere in the world owns more ships than that. Unfortunately, there are, to build up any ship, any fleet, you need to have crew, you need to have proper crew, you need to have proper commercial management, and you need to have proper operation, and you need to have the right ship. Unfortunately, we have been adopting the wrong policy of building up ships, and before we know the kind of trading pattern that these ships are going to serve. To give you an example, Egypt today is one of the major exporters of cement and is becoming quite substantial in export of phosphate rock. The companies involved with phosphate rock are building their own fleet, and the cement companies are looking at building their own fleet, and other authorities are building their own fleet. But this is wrong, because the way you should address this, we are a nation here. Why don't we build up a proper holding company that will cater for all the needs of all the exporters? The cement manufacturer or the phosphate miner does not have to have maritime knowledge. He has to be served by a company which he might, for all intents and purposes, be a partner of,
yes,
but he does not have to manage it, he does not have to run it, because he does not know. And the more you expose yourself to this, the more you expose yourself to even bigger losses. And we've seen this happen before with Egyptian fleets. I don't want to mention company names, but 2 Egyptian companies have been built to compete with one another, and the policy was absolutely ridiculous. That was, of course, in the old days. And then at the end, when the 2 companies nearly collapsed, they merged them into one company. Mm-hmm. But again, the principle and the philosophy of running a shipping company needs to be addressed very carefully. They need to have proper advice from the professionals, and it is extremely important that we are in the when we are watching the outside world, we should know what the outside world wants, what the industry wants from Egypt. That is not just the shipping fleet now. That's, yes, the fleet, that's the ports, that's the regulations, that's everything. And for this purpose, actually, we have a guest visiting Egypt on the 1st of October. That's the chairman of the Baltic Exchange, who is basically the top commercial man in shipping worldwide, and he heads the Baltic Exchange, and the Baltic Exchange is the exchange that manages all shipping indices, how freights are going bad or how freights are going good. You get your finger on the pulse. This is very important, and the gentleman will be visiting not just the Ministry of Maritime Transport, he'll be visiting the Suez Canal Authority also as a means of cooperation with the Suez Canal Authority, because to give the Suez Canal Authority an inside knowledge of what the market is doing will always help the Suez Canal Authority take even a better decision of how to structure their fees and how to structure the rebates for companies, for ships going through the Suez Canal and so on. The same way, the International Chamber of Shipping last May, they also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Suez Canal Authority for also developing how they need to see the operations of ships done, how to see what do they feel is better. And this is something we need as Egypt very, very much, because if we know what the world wants from Egypt and how we can dominate, or not just necessarily dominate, but how we can pioneer in shipping services, we must know what the counterparty needs, what our clients need, what the shipping industry wants of Egypt. That is extremely important. And this is a second phase of a 4-phase project that the International Chamber of Shipping is lodging, which is, first of all, the Memorandum of Understanding was signed 9th of May. Second is the visit of the chairman of the Baltic Exchange. Third will be with COP27, because yes, there's going to be a huge team coming to participate, and they will be participating in not just telling, not just listening or something, but they will be coming to express the views of how shipping is reacting to COP27 and how shipping can contribute to support the Egyptian authorities for building up even a better environment. Stage number 4, we hope beginning of next year, there will be a major seminar, and that seminar will be it will carry the logo of Egypt, a World Maritime Center, and that will be hosted hopefully here in Egypt, and it will include all authorities and all entities involved in shipping worldwide under the banner of International Chamber of Shipping and the Baltic Exchange.
How do you see the efforts of the chairman of the Suez Canal Authority, Osama Rabia, in the past period? Because we've seen trips to Europe to be knowing, as you mentioned, knowing what the outside world wants of us now.
I have a personal opinion of Admiral Osama Rabia as a person who I respect very much.
Yes.
He has been a fighter all out. He has taken over a huge responsibility. His predecessor was equally efficient and equally clever. But Admiral Osama Rabia was confronted by a catastrophe in the grounding of that monstrous ship, Ever Given.
Yes.
And he managed to refloat her in 6 days. And while all the salvage experts in the world said the ship is going to be there for weeks, if not months, and he defied all of them by refloating her in 6 days, totally intact, no damage whatsoever. And like like Admiral Mohab Mamish, when he finished the development of the Suez Canal in 11 months instead of 3 years, and everybody from the International Chamber of Shipping, the delegation that visited, said chapeau to the Admiral and everybody in the Suez Canal. The same thing goes to Admiral Osama Rabia, chapeau to what he did refloating this horrible accident in 6 days, where it could have been a total disaster, and we could be, until today, 1.5 years later, we could still have a closed canal if it was not for the care and the professionalism of the Suez Canal Authority team in general, and the personal involvement of Admiral Osama Rabia, not on a daily basis, but on a minute-per-minute basis, because he was living on a tug throughout the thing, right on the spot, right on the scene. So definitely, yes. Now, the Suez Canal Authority has launched a new project of developing the southern sector of the Suez Canal, which of course is a much more difficult task than the northern sector, because that area is very harsh terrain. The geography or the geology of the bank is very difficult. It's basalt and very hard sandstone, so it is taking a lot more effort. But if he is saying 2023 will be the end of 2023 or June 2023, I am sure, and I can tell you on his behalf, well, I'm not talking on his behalf, of course, but I can tell you that he will come up with a surprise saying that, oh, we finished, and probably will be much earlier than the date they have set.
And this brings us to the point that you mentioned. What do the outside world, excuse me, wants from us, specifically in the transport sector and the Suez Canal economic zone?
The transport, well, there's a lot. There's a lot, of course. I mean, we cannot go into all the details here, but
yes.
What they need, any transport sector in the world, or the shipping industry, maritime industry, what do they want from any port? I want to go into the port, pay a certain amount of money, a decent amount of money, not very big, not exaggerated, and I should know exactly what I'm paying, and I should not be confronted with unannounced agendas, or I should be having a proper service from pilots, from tugs, from berthing. I should have services on ports, and that has been improving quite considerably over the last few years, I must admit. However, we still need to develop further our ports, to deepen the ports to be able to accommodate bigger ships, to develop more on our services end, in order to be able to support the larger ships and the larger tonnage calling into Egypt.
Yes, and we will be heading to the other report of the daily debate for tonight, how to be attracting investments through the Egyptian sovereign fund, about $3.3 billion in the past couple of years. From the Arab region, we'll be having more details in the upcoming report.
Of Egypt, TSFE, has been successful in attracting investments worth $3.3 billion from Arab sovereign funds in 2022. This statement was made by the fund's Chief Executive Director, CEO, Ayman Suleiman, in a meeting with the Prime Minister, Mustafa Madbouli, in the presence of the Planning Minister, Hala Said, and other officials. He said that the fund had attracted investments in both dollars and Egyptian pounds from the private sector in the fields of green hydrogen, tourism, real estate, antiquities, development, industry, financial services, digital transformation, and education. He highlighted that the TSFE is playing a vital role in implementing the state's ownership policy document as per the directives of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi regarding attracting foreign direct investments, FDI, of $40 billion within 4 years. For her part, the Minister of Planning and Economic Development and Chairwoman of the TSFE, Dr. Hala Said, reiterated that the fund is working to optimize assets in accordance with the best globally recognized rules and standards with a view to maximizing their benefits for future generations through its effective management of state-owned entities and companies. The Minister of Planning indicated that one of the most important goals for which the Sovereign Fund was established is to attract investments from regional and international investors and contribute to increasing the participation of the private sector. She stressed that the fund is working hard to achieve this goal in light of the economic fluctuations the world is facing, which negatively affect the flow of investments in emerging markets. She further added that despite this, Egypt remains one of the promising markets and the focus of international investors' attention, which reflects investors' confidence in the Egyptian economy and the economic reform program. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli asserted that the fund would continue to implement the state's policy for luring more private investments, especially foreign private investments, as an important source of hard currency. He noted that the Sovereign Fund of Egypt is currently studying 21 projects for investment in 2022 in different sectors. The meeting witnessed a review of the developments related to the completion of the establishment of a sub-fund to expedite the government offering program within the framework of implementing the government's plan announced by the Prime Minister during the global press conference to offer percentages of a number of state-owned companies in addition to its goal of providing state-owned assets with a value of $40 billion for partnership with the Egyptian and foreign private sector over 4 years.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate. As I said in the beginning of the episode for tonight, we would be focusing on the Suez Canal Economic Zone and the Egyptian commercial fleet. And I'm honored to be having with me over the program for tonight in the studio engineer Sherin and Naggar, the International Maritime Transport Consultant. And in the remaining time of the Daily Debate for tonight, I would like to be asking you about the exports happening through the sea, through the maritime means, and more specifically, gas exports, for example. How are they now?
Well, we have quite a substantial gas reserve. Okay, they've just been discovered not so long ago, and these things do take time to develop and start actually production. But I think once we start the production, and once we start on commercial production, in places like Zohr or Noor or there's several other fields, I think Egypt will become a major power in export of LNG, let alone the handling of the Israeli and the Cypriot gas, which is coming for liquefaction in Damietta and in Edko, and then that is moving further north as well. Now, with the situation with Ukraine and all the problems there are, yes, I think you will find that there's going to be a shift in pattern of trade, where a lot of cargo will be moving from Russia east and from the Black Sea down east, and a lot of cargoes, these cargoes will be substituted by a lot of cargoes from the Arabian Gulf back to the north, to the west, to the consumers like Germany, Italy and France specifically. Those three countries are really having a very hard time. Spain has just managed to satisfy its needs from Algeria. So as far as Egypt is concerned, no, I think I can see that there's going to be a bright future for Egypt, because if you talk about this change of pattern first, this is traffic that the Suez Canal never had before. So this is additional traffic. So I don't think it's not going to be 7 billion. It's going to be a lot more than 7 billion a year this year. Mm-hmm. And God bless them. Let's hope they have even more, because we need every penny. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, yes, the exports of crude oil and exports of gas will be increasing tremendously if we can actually control more our local consumption, because we are a very highly consuming country. Mm-hmm. And we need to take grips on our consumption in order to be able to export as much as possible. Our exports in phosphate are rising, our exports in cement are rising, our exports in a lot of other minerals are rising, and also our export in fresh produce. You might have heard the latest news that last year, 2021, the largest exporter of oranges, fresh citrus, in the world became Egypt for the first time. Yes. It was always Brazil or California, mm-hmm. Rather Florida, not anymore. Now it is Egypt. Egypt is number one. And we'd like to stay there. Okay, fine, let's hope the climate helps us this year, because the climate is a bit funny, but I think God is blessing us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and finally, how do you see the current status of ports all over Egypt on the Mediterranean and the Red Sea?
Ports in Egypt, personally, I see a problem there, because we have, and if I look at it from a foreigner's seat or from the industry's seat, I would say, I'm coming to Egypt, and I have my ship, for example, is going to call at the port of Port Tawfiq, and then is going to discharge in Port Tawfiq, and then going to load from Adabiya. Yes. Now, Port Tawfiq is owned by the Ministry of Transport, whereas Port of Adabiya is owned by the Suez Canal Economic Zone. Now, this is an authority and this is an authority. You have to deal with two authorities, and the distance between them is not even 5 miles. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have various bodies controlling a number of ports. The Navy controls Gargoub, Abu Qir, Bernice, and other ports. The Ministry of Transport controls Damietta, Alexandria, Dekheila, and Safaga on the Red Sea, and of course Port Tawfiq. And you have also the mixture between those three, you need to have a policy. This is what we need to address very quickly and very carefully. A policy that will unify the tariffs, unify the charges, and unify the regulations that govern the use of any of those ports under the three authorities. There is talk about setting up a holding company for ports, but how would that holding company be structured? Nobody still knows. It has not been defined yet.
Yes.
And you need to have it very specifically done. If we talk about petroleum, petroleum ports are even in a bigger or even in a hotter spot. The reason for that is that we have been traditionally for a long time a country that is doing shallow water exploration, where you have the jack-up rigs in shallow waters, drilling. We never had deep-sea drilling, and deep-sea drilling demands use of much bigger supply ships, much bigger service ships to service those deep-sea units. These ships cannot be accommodated in the petroleum ports, so you need to develop petroleum ports in order to be able to cater for the bigger ships, because if you don't, you will be consuming, instead of one big ship, you have to charter 4 small ships, and your expenses are multiple. These are the issues that we need to address on ports.
Yes, but you mentioned that God will bless us in the future. Engineer Sherin Naggar, the International Maritime Transport Consultant in this field specifically. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Anytime. And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.